The Galactic Council chambers fell silent as Admiral Zexathara's mandibles clicked nervously against the crystalline podium. Around the massive circular hall, representatives from 47 different species watched the holographic display with growing unease. Earth hung there in the center, a blue marble that had become the source of their greatest miscalculation in 10,000 years of galactic dominance. "The humans have broken free," Zexathara announced, his voice echoing through translation devices that converted his chittering into languages across the known galaxy. "All 17 slave colonies have been liberated. Our forces are in full retreat." A collective hiss rose from the Serpentine delegation. The Voidwalkers' dark forms shimmered with agitation. Even the crystalline Mentari, usually emotionless in their logical perfection, showed stress fractures along their translucent surfaces. Counselor Yith of the Draconian Empire slammed his scaled fist against his seat. "Impossible. Humans are primitives. They barely mastered interplanetary travel when we arrived. Their technology is thousands of years behind ours." "Was," corrected Admiral Zexathara grimly. "Their advancement rate is unprecedented. In the 50 years since we began harvesting their people, they've somehow leapfrogged millennia of technological development." The holographic display shifted, showing battle footage from the recent liberation of mining colony Zerion 7. Human ships, sleek and deadly, moved through space with impossible grace. Their weapons tore through energy shields that had protected galactic fleets for centuries. But it wasn't just their technology that had evolved. "Look at them fight," whispered Counselor Vash, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. "They move like they're dancing with death itself." The footage showed human soldiers in powered armor moving through the colony's corridors. They didn't just fight to win, they fought with a fury that chilled even the most battle-hardened species. Every step was calculated. Every shot was precise. They moved through enemy positions like water flowing around rocks, unstoppable and fluid. But what truly terrified the assembled aliens was how the humans treated their rescued people. The freed slaves weren't just liberated, they were embraced, healed, and given purpose. Children who had never seen Earth were welcomed as family. Adults broken by years of forced labor were rebuilt, not just physically but spiritually. "They don't just rescue," observed the ancient Mindweaver elder, his psychic voice touching every consciousness in the chamber. "They heal. They restore what we broke. This is not merely military prowess. This is something far more dangerous." Admiral Zexathara nodded grimly. "Our intelligence suggests they call it humanity. It's not just what they are, it's what they do. Every species they encounter, they try to understand, to connect with, to elevate." The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. For millennia, the galactic community had enslaved species after species, viewing lesser civilizations as resources to be harvested. They had perfected the art of breaking spirits, of reducing proud peoples to mere tools for their expansion. Then they had found Earth. The planet had seemed perfect. Rich in resources, populated by a species that had barely left their homeworld, and showing promising signs of adaptability and intelligence, the invasion had been swift and efficient. Millions of humans were taken, scattered across the galaxy to serve in mines, factories, and research facilities. What the aliens hadn't understood was that humans possessed something none of them had encountered before, an unbreakable bond to each other that transcended genetics, geography, and even time. When humans were scattered across the stars, they didn't break. They adapted, they learned, they plotted. "The Proxima Station incident should have been our warning," Admiral Zexathara continued, calling up another holographic display. "When the humans there revolted, we assumed it was an isolated rebellion. We were wrong." The display showed the mining asteroid where it had all begun. A group of human slaves had somehow built a transmitter from scrap metal and mining equipment. The signal they sent wasn't a call for rescue, it was a lesson. Technical specifications, star charts, and most importantly, a message that spread like wildfire through every human community across the galaxy. We are not forgotten. We are coming home, and we're bringing friends. That was the moment everything changed. Humans in slave colonies began looking at their alien captors differently. They studied their technology not with the eyes of servants, but with the calculating gaze of engineers and scientists. They watched guard rotations not with fear, but with tactical assessment. They learned our weaknesses by serving us, Counselor Yith growled. Every species that enslaved them taught them something new. The crystalline taught them about energy manipulation. The Draconian Empire showed them military tactics. The Void Walkers revealed the secrets of faster-than-light travel. And they shared everything, added the Mindweaver Elder. Unlike us, they didn't hoard knowledge for advantage. Every discovery made its way to every human community. Their collective intelligence grew exponentially. The escape from the Beta Centauri research facility had been the first sign of their true capabilities. Humans there had not only broken free, but had somehow convinced 3 other enslaved species to join them. When rescue ships arrived, they found not just empty cells, but a fully operational research station run by a coalition of former slaves who had turned their captivity into a university. They didn't just escape, Admiral Zexthara explained to the increasingly nervous council. They recruited, they inspired, they taught other species that slavery wasn't inevitable, that freedom was possible. The liberation of Colony Delta 9 had shattered the myth of galactic superiority forever. A combined force of humans and their alien allies had not only freed every slave on the planet, but had done so without a single casualty among the prisoners. They had somehow managed to neutralize every guard, disable every weapon, and shut down every security system simultaneously. How? Demanded Counselor Vash. Our security systems are quantum encrypted, biometrically locked, and AI monitored. How did primitives bypass defenses that took us millennia to perfect? Because we underestimated what they consider primitive, the Mindweaver Elder replied. We built our systems to be technologically impenetrable. They used psychology, sociology, and what they call human nature. They convinced our own guards to help them. The horror of that realization spread through the chamber like a disease. The humans hadn't just broken their technology, they had broken their trust in their own people. Alien guards across the galaxy were now suspect. Had they been turned? Were they still loyal? How could anyone tell? But the final straw had been the liberation of the Omega Sector, an entire star system dedicated to breaking the spirits of the most rebellious slaves had not just been freed, it had been transformed. The humans had somehow convinced every single alien administrator, guard, and overseer to abandon their posts and join a growing coalition of liberation forces. They offered them something we never did, Admiral Zexthara said quietly. They offered them redemption. They showed mercy to those who showed remorse, and they gave everyone a chance to choose their side. The display now showed current intelligence reports. Across the galaxy, human liberation fleets moved with purpose and coordination that defied belief. They struck swiftly, freed everyone they could, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. But they weren't just hit-and-run tactics, they were building something. They're creating a network, observed Counselor Yith with growing dread. Every freed colony becomes a base. Every liberated species becomes an ally. They're not just rescuing their people, they're building an empire based on freedom instead of conquest. The most terrifying reports were coming from the Rim territories. Human diplomatic missions were contacting independent species, offering technology, knowledge, and partnership in exchange for nothing more than friendship. Species that had remained neutral for millennia were suddenly announcing alliances with Earth. They're doing to us what we've done to others, whispered Counselor Vash. But they're doing it with kindness instead of conquest. How do we fight an enemy that makes allies by helping people? The question hung in the air like a poison cloud. For 10,000 years, galactic civilization had been built on a simple principle: the strong dominated the weak. It was efficient, logical, and had created the greatest empire in known history. But humans were proving that there was another way, and it was devastatingly effective. "What are our military options?" demanded Counselor Yeath. Admiral Zexathara's mandibles drooped. "Limited. Every engagement has resulted in defeat. Their technology is now equal to ours, and their tactics are superior, but that's not the worst part." "What could be worse than military defeat?" asked the Mindweaver Elder. "They're winning the war of ideas," Admiral Zexathara replied. "Our own people are beginning to question why we enslave others. Efficiency reports are being challenged. Military officers are requesting transfers away from slave operations. Some of our colonies are even releasing their human slaves voluntarily, hoping for mercy when the liberation fleets arrive." The council chamber erupted in outraged clicks, hisses, and psychic static. The foundation of their civilization was cracking, not under military assault, but under the weight of a simple question that humans had somehow planted in every corner of the galaxy. Why do the strong have the right to enslave the weak? "We could attempt to negotiate," suggested one of the younger crystalline delegates, her surface flickering with uncertain patterns. "With what leverage?" snapped Counselor Yeath. "They have our former slaves. They have our technology. They have the moral authority. What could we possibly offer them that they couldn't take by force?" "Perhaps," said the Mindweaver Elder slowly. "That is exactly the point. They could take by force, but they choose not to. They are showing us a different way to be strong." The implications of that statement struck the chamber like a meteor. The humans weren't just winning, they were demonstrating that victory without cruelty was possible. They were proving that strength didn't require the subjugation of others. "What do they want?" asked Admiral Zexathara finally. "What are their terms for peace?" The answer came from the chamber's central communication array. A message had arrived, transmitted simultaneously to every major galactic government. The sender was identified as Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Liberation Fleet. The message was simple, translated into every known language, and accompanied by documentation that proved its authenticity. "The age of slavery is over. Every sentient being deserves freedom, dignity, and the chance to choose their own destiny. We offer peace to those who embrace this truth and war to those who reject it. The choice is yours, but the outcome is inevitable. Humanity remembers its children, and we are coming home." The reckoning Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the massive fleet assembled before her through the reinforced viewports. Ships from dozens of species moved in perfect formation, their hulls bearing the marks of liberation rather than conquest. Each vessel told a story of freedom won through courage and compassion rather than fear and domination. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 more systems," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were witnessing. "The Calaxian Empire just announced they're releasing all human slaves and requesting immediate peace negotiations." Sarah nodded grimly. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council received humanity's ultimatum, and the response had been exactly what she'd expected: chaos, division, and the slow crumbling of an empire built on others' suffering. "What's the status of the holdout systems?" she asked. "The Draconian Empire and the Voidwalker Collective are still refusing to negotiate," replied her chief intelligence officer, Commander Reeves. "They've formed a military alliance and are massing forces at the Nexus Gate. Intel suggests they're planning a final stand." Sarah felt the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders. They were so close to ending this nightmare, but the last steps would be the bloodiest. The Draconians and Voidwalkers represented the old guard of galactic civilization, those who would rather die than admit their way was wrong. "Ma'am," interrupted Communications Officer Park. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the surface of Haven Colony. It's from the refugee camps." Sarah's expression softened. Haven Colony had been one of their first major victories, a former slave processing center that they'd transformed into a sanctuary for rescued humans and their alien allies. The transformation had been miraculous, but also heartbreaking. Many of the humans they'd rescued bore scars that would never fully heal. The holographic display flickered to life, showing Dr. Maria Vasquez, one of the leading specialists in what they'd come to call liberation therapy. Behind her, Sarah could see the sprawling camps that housed nearly 1 million former slaves from across the galaxy. "Admiral," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice carrying both exhaustion and hope, "I wanted you to see this before you make any decisions about the final campaigns." The image shifted to show a group of children playing in what had once been a guard tower. Human children, Altarian younglings, and even a few young crystalline beings moved together as if they'd never known a galaxy where their species were enemies. They laughed in a universal language that transcended translation devices. "These are the children of slaves," Dr. Vasquez explained. "They were born in captivity, raised to serve, and told they were less than nothing. Watch what happens when you give them freedom." The camera followed one of the human children as she ran to a makeshift playground. There, a group of older teenagers from various species were teaching the younger ones to read using tablets that displayed text in multiple languages simultaneously. Sarah recognized the teaching method. It was pure human innovation, adapted to work with the diverse cognitive patterns of different species. "They're not just learning to read," Dr. Vasquez continued. "They're learning to trust, to hope, to dream of futures that extend beyond survival. Yesterday, a 12-year-old Altarian asked me if she could become a doctor, Admiral. She'd never seen one who wasn't treating injuries inflicted by masters." The image shifted again, showing the medical facilities where Dr. Vasquez worked. Here, the true cost of galactic slavery was laid bare. Humans with neural implants designed to suppress independent thought. Altarians whose wing muscles had been surgically modified to prevent escape. Crystalline beings whose surfaces had been chemically etched to display ownership marks. "But watch this," Dr. Vasquez said, leading the camera to a rehabilitation room. Inside, Sarah saw something that made her breath catch. A young human man, his head scarred from where control implants had been removed, was working with an Altarian engineer and a crystalline mathematician. Together, they were designing something Sarah recognized as a revolutionary new type of faster-than-light drive. "They're creating together," Dr. Vasquez explained, "taking the knowledge forced into them through slavery and using it to build something that could help everyone. They're not bitter about what was done to them. They're determined that it never happens to anyone else." The transmission ended, and Sarah stood in silence for a long moment. Around her, the bridge crew waited for her decision. They all knew what came next, the final assault on the systems still holding human slaves. It would be brutal, bloody, and would test every principle they'd fought for. "Admiral," Commander Reeves said quietly, "the Draconians have just executed 50 human slaves in response to our latest liberation. They're threatening to kill more unless we withdraw from their territory." Sarah's jaw tightened. This was the choice that had faced humanity since the beginning of their liberation campaign. How far were they willing to go to save their people? How much blood were they willing to shed for freedom? "Signal the fleet," she said finally. "We advance on the Draconian positions at dawn. But I want every ship captain to remember our protocols. We're not here for revenge. We're here for rescue." The bridge erupted in activity as orders flowed through the communication systems. Sarah watched the massive liberation fleet begin to move, each ship representing not just military might, but a promise made to every slave still in chains. The journey to Draconian space took 2 weeks, and every day brought new intelligence about what they would face. The enemy had learned from their previous defeats and had created what they called unbreakable defenses, minefields that adapted to incoming ships, energy weapons that learned from each encounter. And most horrifically, they had rigged their slave colonies with quantum bombs that would detonate if liberation forces attempted rescue. "They're willing to destroy everything rather than lose it," observed Commander Torres as they reviewed the intelligence reports. "Including their own people." "That's the difference between us and them," Sarah replied. "They see people as property. We see them as family." The first contact with Draconian forces came at the edge of their territory. A massive space station, bristling with weapons and powered by the labor of 1,000,000 slaves, hung in space like a mechanical planet. The station's commander, General Krath, opened communications immediately. The Draconian appeared on their view screen, his scaled face twisted with rage and desperation. "Human Admiral," he hissed, "you have 30 seconds to withdraw before I detonate the quantum charges and send every slave on this station into the void." Sarah studied his face, looking for the tells that Dr. Vasquez had taught her to recognize. Fear masquerading as anger, desperation hidden behind threats, the behavior of someone whose entire world view was crumbling. "General Krath," she said calmly, "I know you can hear me. Not just my words, but the truth behind them. You're not a monster. You're a soldier who's been told that slavery is necessary for order. But you've seen our fleets, you've read our reports, you know that we've created something better." "Lies!" Krath roared. But Sarah noticed his claws weren't moving toward the detonation controls. "Your own intelligence reports confirm it," Sarah continued. "The systems that have joined us aren't falling into chaos. They're thriving. Crime is down. Production is up. Innovation is exploding. We didn't destroy your civilization, we improved it." On her tactical display, Sarah could see the human ships moving into position. But they weren't surrounding the station for assault. They were forming a protective perimeter. If Krath detonated those charges, they would contain the explosion and try to save as many lives as possible. "You want to save my station?" Krath asked, his voice betraying confusion. "I want to save everyone on it," Sarah replied, "including you. The age of slavery is over, General, but that doesn't mean the age of redemption has to be. You can choose to be remembered as the Draconian who ended slavery in your territory, or as the one who died defending it. Either way, slavery ends today." For a long moment, the communication channel was silent. Then slowly, General Krath's scaled hand moved away from the detonation controls. What happens to me?" "To my people?" he asked quietly. "You help us free the slaves on your station," Sarah replied. "Then you help us design a transition plan that preserves Draconian culture while embracing freedom for everyone. You become part of the solution instead of part of the problem." The liberation of the Nexus station became a model for everything that followed. Draconian guards worked alongside human marines to safely disable the quantum charges. Former slaves and former masters sat in the same rooms, planning a future where both could coexist with dignity. But the most powerful moment came when General Krath himself removed the neural control collar from a young human engineer who had been forced to design weapons for 3 decades. "I am sorry," Krath said simply, the translator struggling with the emotion in his voice. "I was taught that your suffering was necessary. I was wrong." The human looked up at the towering reptilian general, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for letting me remember my name." Word of Krath's surrender spread through Draconian space like wildfire. System after system began laying down arms, not in defeat, but in acceptance. The old order wasn't being destroyed, it was being transformed. The Void Walker Collective proved more stubborn. Their dark ships emerged from quantum space like nightmares made manifest, their crews determined to fight to the last being. The battle that followed lit up 3-star systems and lasted for days. But even in the midst of desperate combat, humanity's principles held firm. When a Void Walker cruiser's life support failed, human ships moved to rescue the survivors. When Void Walker ground forces were trapped by their own falling orbital platforms, human Marines risked their lives to pull them to safety. "Why?" demanded Void Walker Commander Nexus as human medics treated his injuries aboard the UES Defiance. "Why save us? We came here to kill you." "Because that's what humans do," replied Dr. Chen, the ship's chief medical officer and Sarah's younger sister. "We save people, even people who want to hurt us. Especially people who want to hurt us, because they're usually the ones who need saving the most." The final Void Walker stronghold fell not to weapons, but to something far more powerful. A broadcast from their own rescued slaves, former Void Walkers who had been enslaved by their own people for showing weakness, compassion, creativity, and the desire for peace. "We are your children," they said in the strange, harmonic language of their species. "We are your artists, your dreamers, your healers. You cast us out because we refused to embrace the darkness, but we never stopped loving you. Come home, come back to the light." The sight of their own people, healthy and happy and free, broke the last resistance of the Void Walker Collective. Ships began surrendering in such numbers that the Liberation Fleet couldn't process them all. But the real victory came in the days that followed, as former enemies worked together to plan a galaxy where every species could thrive. The Draconian Empire announced the formation of the first interspecies councils, where former slaves would have equal voices with former masters. The Crystalline Collective began sharing their mathematical knowledge freely, leading to technological breakthroughs that benefited everyone. Even the Void Walkers began experimenting with art and music, creating beauty instead of fear. Admiral Sarah Chen stood once again on the bridge of the UES Defiance, but this time she was watching something unprecedented in galactic history. A peace conference where every chair was filled not by conquerors dividing spoils, but by former enemies working together to build something better. "Admiral," reported Commander Torres, "we just received confirmation from the Outer Rim. The last slave camp has been liberated. Every human in the galaxy is now free." Sarah nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders that she'd carried for longer than she cared to remember. But she knew their work wasn't finished. Freedom was just the beginning. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "We're going home. We're bringing our family with us, and we're going to show them what Earth looks like when it's ready to welcome the galaxy." The New Dawn. 10 years had passed since the last slave collar was removed, and the galaxy had transformed in ways that even humanity's greatest optimists couldn't have imagined. The bridge of the UES Harmony, Earth's newest diplomatic vessel, hummed with activity as representatives from 47 different species worked side by side, planning the future of their shared civilization. Admiral Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Freedom Alliance, stood before the massive view screen showing Earth in all its blue and green glory. But this wasn't the same Earth that had been invaded 70 years ago. This was a world reborn, expanded, and shared. Orbital stations ringed the planet like jewels, each one a fusion of human engineering and alien innovation. Draconian crystal farms grew in perfect geometric patterns, their energy feeding the planet's growing cities. Altarian sky gardens floated in the upper atmosphere, their bioluminescent plants creating aurora displays that could be seen from space. Even the mysterious Void Walkers had contributed, their quantum technologies allowing for impossible architectural marvels that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that human science was still struggling to understand. "Ambassador Chen," called out Dr. Zara al-Rashid, the head of the Integration Council. "The delegates from the Outer Rim are ready to present their proposal for the new education initiative." Sarah turned to see a group that would have been unthinkable decades ago. Former slave masters and former slaves working together, their children playing at their feet while they designed the future. The draconian delegate, General Krath's daughter, was now one of the galaxy's leading experts in interspecies psychology. Beside her, a young crystalline being who had been born in captivity was revolutionizing mathematics by incorporating emotional patterns into quantum calculations. "Thank you, Dr. Al-Rashid," Sarah replied. "But first, I believe we have some special guests arriving." The main view screen shifted to show the approaching ships. These weren't military vessels, but something far more precious. The first graduating class of the Galactic Freedom Academy, returning from their tour of liberated worlds. Among them were humans who had never seen Earth, aliens who had been born free because of humanity's sacrifices, and most remarkably, the children of former enemies who now counted each other as family. "Incoming transmission from the GFS New Horizon," announced the communications officer. A young Altarian whose parents had been among the first to join the Liberation Fleet. The screen filled with the faces of 24 young beings, their species as diverse as the galaxy itself, but their expressions united by something that had once been the rarest commodity in the universe: hope. "Earth Control, this is Cadet Commander Maya Chen Vasquez, reporting successful completion of our diplomatic mission to the Andromeda Contact Zone," announced a young woman whose features combined human and Altarian genetics in a way that spoke to the galaxy's new reality. Sarah's heart swelled with pride and something deeper than love. Maya was her adopted daughter, one of the first children born to the freed slaves of Haven Colony. She had never known slavery, never experienced the fear that had defined previous generations. She was living proof that the galaxy could be better. "Report, Cadet Commander," Sarah replied formally, though her smile betrayed her maternal pride. "Ma'am, the Andromedans have agreed to join the Freedom Alliance," Maya announced, her excitement barely contained by military protocol. "They were initially suspicious of our intentions, given their history with galactic conquest from our region. But when they saw our crews working together, when they met beings who had been slaves and masters now serving together, they realized we were different," finished Cadet Nexus Prime, a young void walker whose harmonious voice had become legendary for its ability to calm even the most hostile negotiations. "Different how?" asked Dr. Al-Rashid, leaning forward with the intensity of someone who had spent her life studying interspecies relations. "They said they'd never encountered conquerors who brought gifts instead of chains," replied Cadet Scales of Justice, the young draconian whose diplomatic skills had apparently inherited the best qualities of both his warrior heritage and his liberated education. "When we offered to share our technology and asked for nothing but friendship in return, they didn't believe us at first." "What convinced them?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "The school," Maya replied softly. "When we showed them the recordings from the children's exchange program, when they saw former slave children and former master children learning together, playing together, creating together, they wept. Apparently, Andromedans have very strong family bonds, and they couldn't understand how we'd managed to turn enemies into family." The view screen shifted to show the recordings Maya referenced. Children from every species in the galaxy sitting in classrooms together, not just learning about each other's cultures, but creating new ones. Art that combined crystalline mathematics with human emotion, with draconian honor, with Altarian beauty, with void walker mystery. Science projects that solved problems through cooperation rather than competition. "Most importantly," added Cadet Nexus Prime, "they want to learn how we did it. How we took a galaxy built on slavery and conquest and transformed it into something based on freedom and cooperation. They're sending a delegation of their finest scholars to study what they're calling the human miracle." Sarah felt a familiar discomfort at that phrase. Over the years, various species had tried to mythologize humanity's role in galactic liberation, turning them into some kind of perfect saviors. The truth was far more complicated and far more beautiful. "It wasn't a human miracle," Sarah said firmly. "It was a galactic awakening. Humans didn't save the galaxy. We just reminded everyone that saving each other is what civilized beings do." "With respect, Ambassador," interrupted a new voice from the communication array, "you're being modest again." The screen split to show another approaching ship, this one bearing the insignia of the Galactic Historical Commission. The speaker was Professor Mindweave 7, a crystalline being who had dedicated the past decade to documenting the liberation wars. "Professor," Sarah acknowledged with a slight smile. "Still trying to turn history into legend?" "I'm trying to record truth," the professor replied, his crystalline surface flickering with the patterns that indicated scholarly excitement. "And the truth is that humanity did something unprecedented in galactic history. You had every right to conquest after your victory, every justification for revenge after your suffering. Instead, you chose compassion. You chose to lift up your former enemies rather than tear them down." "We chose to remember that our former enemies were people," Sarah corrected. "People who had been taught that slavery was natural, that conquest was inevitable. Once they learned differently, they chose compassion too. The Draconians who guard refugee camps now, the Void Walkers who use their quantum technology to build schools instead of weapons, the Crystalline who share their knowledge freely instead of hoarding it. The choice to be better isn't uniquely human." "But humans were the first to prove it was possible?" Professor Mindweave 7 insisted. "For 10,000 years, galactic civilization was built on a simple principle: might makes right. You shattered that principle not through superior might, though you certainly developed that, but through superior morality. You proved that right makes might." The debate was interrupted by an urgent communication from Earth's surface. President Martinez, a former slave who had been elected to lead Earth's government in the new galactic democracy, appeared on screen with news that would once have been impossible. "Ambassador, we've just received a delegation from the Far Rim Confederacy. They're requesting to join the Freedom Alliance, and they're bringing gifts." "What kind of gifts?" Sarah asked, though she was learning to be wary of surprises from distant civilizations. "Technologies we've never seen before, medical advances that could extend life indefinitely, energy sources that could power entire galaxies, manufacturing techniques that could end scarcity forever." President Martinez paused, his expression mixing awe with concern. "Ambassador, they're offering to share everything they've learned over millions of years of development, for free, as payment for what they call the gift of hope." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Civilizations that had never even heard of Earth until recently were willing to share their greatest achievements because of what humanity and its allies had accomplished. The liberation of the slaves hadn't just freed individuals, it had proven to the galaxy that better was possible. "There's more," President Martinez continued. "Intelligence reports suggest that similar delegations are heading toward Earth from every corner of known space. Species that have remained hidden for millennia are emerging from isolation. Ancient civilizations are awakening from stasis. The entire galaxy is waking up," Sarah finished softly. "They're all waking up to the possibility that they don't have to be alone anymore." On the main view screen, she could see the evidence. Ships of designs she'd never encountered before, moving toward Earth in peaceful formation. Energy signatures that defied current understanding of physics. Technologies that seemed to blur the line between science and magic. "Ambassador," called out Dr. Al-Rashid, "we're receiving transmission requests from 47 new civilizations. They're all asking the same thing. How do we join? How do we become part of this?" Sarah looked around the bridge at the faces staring back at her. Humans and aliens, former slaves and former masters, children of war who had become architects of peace. This was what victory really looked like, not the defeat of enemies, but their transformation into friends. "Open channels to all incoming delegations," she ordered, "and prepare the welcome protocols. Not as conquerors greeting the conquered, not as superiors addressing inferiors, but as family welcoming family. Because that's what this galaxy is now, one great, strange, beautiful family." The communication array lit up with incoming signals as civilizations that had lived in isolation for eons reached out to touch the light of hope that Earth had kindled. Each transmission brought offers of knowledge, friendship, and cooperation. But more than that, they brought something that had been missing from the galaxy for so long that many species had forgotten it existed. Joy. Young Maya's voice cut through the chatter with a simple observation that captured everything they had accomplished. "Grandmother was right. She used to tell me that humans were gardeners before they were warriors. She said we didn't fight to destroy our enemies. We fought to plant seeds of hope in the soil of despair. Look around, Ambassador. Look what we've grown." Sarah looked, and what she saw took her breath away. Through the view screen, she could see Earth surrounded by ships from across the galaxy, but also by gardens, floating agricultural platforms where every species shared the techniques that had sustained them through their darkest times. Art installations where former enemies collaborated to create beauty beyond imagination. Scientific research stations where the combined knowledge of the galaxy was being used to solve problems that had plagued civilization since its beginning. "This is Fleet Admiral Chen Vasquez," Sarah announced on an open channel that reached every ship, every station, every settlement in the expanding sphere of freedom around Earth. "On behalf of humanity and our allies in the Galactic Freedom Alliance, welcome home, all of you. Welcome to the family." The response was overwhelming. Transmissions poured in from civilizations she'd never heard of, each one carrying the same message of gratitude and hope. But the one that moved her most came from an unexpected source, the former Draconian Empire, now calling itself the Draconian Republic. From General Krath Rex, speaking for all free Draconians everywhere, the message began. "We have not forgotten the lesson you taught us. Strength is not measured by those you can conquer, but by those you can convince to stand beside you. Today, the entire galaxy stands beside us. Thank you, humans of Earth. Thank you for teaching us that enemies are just friends we haven't made yet." As night fell over Earth, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the orbital station, watching the lights of 1,000 different civilizations twinkling in the darkness. Each light represented millions of beings who had been given a choice they'd never had before, the choice to be better, to do better, to build better. Beside her, Maya pointed to a particularly bright cluster of lights near the edge of the solar system. "What do you think is out there, Admiral? What other civilizations are waiting for their chance to join us?" Sarah smiled, remembering a conversation she'd had with Dr. Vasquez years ago in the refugee camps of Haven Colony. They had wondered then if freedom was worth the fight, if the cost of liberation would ever justify the price paid. Now, she knew the answer. "I think there's a galaxy full of people waiting to come home," she replied, "and we'll be here to welcome them, no matter how long it takes, no matter how far they've traveled, no matter what they've done in the past. Because that's what family does. Family forgives. Family includes. Family never gives up on anyone." The last transmission of the day came from the deepest reaches of space, from a civilization so ancient that it predated the first galactic empires. Their message was simple but profound. "We have watched for 10 million years, waiting for a species to prove that intelligence and compassion could coexist. We are no longer waiting. We are coming home." As Sarah watched the stars, she realized that humanity's greatest victory wasn't the liberation of their enslaved people. It was the discovery that the galaxy was full of species waiting for permission to be kind, to be generous, to be family to each other. And now, finally, they had that permission. The galaxy had awakened from its long nightmare of conquest and slavery, and it was ready to dream again. Earth's final warning: stop attacking, or we'll unleash our true power. The Galactic Council chambers had never seen such tension. Representatives from 12 different species sat in their floating crystalline pods, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, hums, and telepathic pulses that filled the vast, dome-shaped room. At the center, on a simple metal chair that looked almost primitive compared to the advanced seating around it, sat Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth. The Zephyrian High Commander, his serpentine body coiled in his bioluminescent pod, spoke first. His voice carried the authority of someone who had never been challenged. "Human, your species has been warned repeatedly. Your expansion into the outer rim sectors violates the galactic accords established 3,000 years before your kind even discovered fire." Sarah remained perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. She had been chosen for this moment not because she was the most diplomatic human available, but because she possessed something the other species had learned to fear in humans: absolute calm in the face of overwhelming odds. "Commander Zithara," she said, using the Zephyrian's full ceremonial name, "we have established colonies on exactly 7 uninhabited worlds. Each settlement follows the terraforming protocols your own scientists approved. We have harmed no existing ecosystems and displaced no sentient life." The insectoid representative from the Hive Collective chittered in what passed for laughter among her species. "Uninhabited by your definition, human. Your kind sees empty worlds where we see sacred spaces, breeding grounds, and future expansion zones." "Future expansion zones," Sarah repeated slowly, tasting each word. "You mean planets you might want to claim in the next few centuries, assuming your population growth requires it?" The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. The crystalline elders, beings of pure silicon who rarely spoke, suddenly pulsed with a deep red light that everyone recognized as extreme displeasure. "Your arrogance is precisely why this council has voted," announced the elder's synthesized voice, each word cutting through the air like a blade. "Humanity will withdraw from all 7 colonies within 1 solar rotation. Failure to comply will result in immediate military action." Sarah stood slowly. Her movement was deliberate, controlled, and somehow managed to capture the attention of every being in the chamber. "I need to be absolutely clear about what you're threatening. You're saying that if humanity doesn't abandon colonies we've spent 3 years establishing, colonies that violate no existing treaties, you will attack us?" "The vote was unanimous except for your own objection," the Zephyrian commander said, his hood flaring in what humans had learned was a display of dominance. "The combined fleets of the Galactic Council represent over 40,000 ships. Your entire species operates fewer than 200 vessels." 213, actually, Sarah corrected. "But I appreciate you keeping track." The Hive Collective representative leaned forward in her pod. "You mock us even now? Your species' ship designs are primitive. Your weapons technology is barely adequate for system defense. Your fastest vessels require weeks to travel distances our ships cover in days." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "All true. Your intelligence is quite good." She paused, looking around the chamber slowly. "But I think there might be some gaps in your information. The Aquatic Depths delegation, massive beings who rarely left their water-filled pods, suddenly became very still. Among the younger species, this might have gone unnoticed, but the crystalline elders had been observing galactic politics for millennia. Stillness in the depths dwellers meant they had sensed something the others had missed. "What gaps?" demanded the Zephyrian commander. Sarah reached into her jacket and withdrew a small, simple device that looked like nothing more than a metal rectangle with a few buttons. Every security system in the chamber immediately went active, scanning the device for weapons signatures or dangerous technology. "This is a communication device," Sarah said calmly as defensive barriers shimmered to life around the various pods. "I'm going to use it to contact my ship and deliver your ultimatum to my government." She pressed a single button and spoke clearly. "Ambassador Chen to Earth Command. The Galactic Council has demanded withdrawal from all Outer Rim colonies within 24 hours. They've threatened military action if we refuse." She paused, looked directly at the Zephyrian commander, and added, "They seem to believe they have significant military superiority." The response came immediately. A calm voice that somehow carried despite the simplicity of the device. "Understood, Ambassador. Please inform the Council that Earth's response will be delivered within 1 hour. Maintain your position." Sarah clicked off the device and returned it to her jacket. "My government will respond shortly. I suggest we recess until then." The Zephyrian commander's hood flared wider. "There is nothing to discuss, human. You will comply or face the consequences." "Oh, we'll definitely respond to your threat," Sarah said, her tone remaining conversational. "But I think you might want to hear our answer before you commit to any particular course of action." The crystalline elders pulsed again, this time a deep amber color that the other species had learned meant deep thought or concern. The eldest among them, a being whose consciousness had observed the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations, spoke with unusual directness. "Human Ambassador, your species has shown remarkable adaptability since joining galactic society. But the mathematics of this situation are clear. Compliance is your only logical option." Sarah smiled, and for the first time since entering the chamber, she looked genuinely pleased. "Respectfully, Elder, I think your mathematics might be based on incomplete data." The hour that followed felt like an eternity. Representatives from the various species used their advanced communication systems to coordinate fleet movements and discuss deployment strategies. The humans, they noted, seemed to have only a few ships in the entire sector, and those were old, slow vessels that posed no real threat to anyone. The Zephyrian military commander present at the session, a scarred veteran named Korthax, ran continuous scans of human positions throughout the galaxy. "They have ships near their home system, scattered through their established territories, and 3 vessels en route to the Outer Rim colonies. Nothing that could possibly threaten a coordinated galactic response." When the hour ended, Sarah's communication device activated without her touching it. "Ambassador Chen, this is Admiral Harrison. Please inform the Galactic Council that Earth's official response is as follows." Sarah looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. "The Council is listening, Admiral. The United Earth government has reviewed the Council's ultimatum. We find the demands unreasonable, the threats unwarranted, and the entire approach unnecessarily hostile. Therefore, our response is simple: no." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of outrage. The Zephyrian commander was halfway out of his pod, his defensive systems charging weapons that shouldn't have been functional in the council chambers. The Hive Collective representative was clicking so rapidly her translation device couldn't keep up. Even the normally stoic Aquatic Depths delegation was thrashing in their pods. But Sarah noticed that the crystalline elders had gone completely still and dark. "Furthermore," Admiral Harrison's voice continued, cutting through the noise, "Earth hereby issues its own ultimatum. Any hostile action taken against human colonies or vessels will be considered an act of war. We strongly advise against testing our resolve in this matter." "This is madness!" screamed the Hive Collective representative. "Your species will be obliterated." Sarah stood again, and this time her movement commanded absolute silence. "Before you make any irreversible decisions," she said quietly, I need to share something with you. Something my government has authorized me to reveal. She reached into her other jacket pocket and withdrew what appeared to be a simple data pad. 3 years ago, when we established our first Outer Rim colony, your intelligence services noted that our ships were slow, primitive, and limited in number. Your assessment was completely accurate. She activated the pad, and a holographic display appeared above her head, showing what looked like technical specifications. What you missed, she continued, was that those ships were never intended for warfare. They were research vessels, designed for one specific purpose: to study something we found in the ruins of an ancient civilization on the edge of what you call the Dark Zone. The Dark Zone. Every species in the chamber knew that designation. It was the region of space where several highly advanced civilizations had once existed, all of whom had vanished mysteriously over 50,000 years ago. The zone was considered too dangerous for exploration by any of the current galactic powers. "Human ships have been operating in the Dark Zone?" asked the crystalline elder, its voice carrying a tremor that its species hadn't displayed in recorded history. "For 3 years," Sarah confirmed. "We found something there. Something that the previous civilizations had been working on before they disappeared. They called it the Final Protocol." The holographic display changed, showing what appeared to be a massive structure drifting in the void of space. It was clearly artificial, but its design followed no architectural principles any of the assembled species recognized. "We've spent 3 years studying it, understanding it, and learning to operate it." Sarah looked directly at the Zephyrian commander. "Your intelligence was right about our fleet being primitive and limited, but that's because we've been investing in something else entirely." The Hive Collective representative leaned forward. "What does this weapon do?" "It's not a weapon," Sarah said simply. "It's something much more significant than that." The chamber fell completely silent. Even the background hum of the station's life support systems seemed muted. "The Final Protocol is a choice," Sarah explained. "The previous civilizations faced the same problems we see today: competition for resources, territorial disputes, species thinking they had the right to dictate terms to others. They found a solution." The holographic display shifted again, showing what appeared to be a galaxy-wide network of similar structures, all connected by streams of energy that defied current understanding of physics. They built a system that could reshape the fundamental nature of space itself within a given region. Not destroy it, not conquer it, but change the basic rules by which matter and energy operate. Sarah paused, letting the implications sink in. "We've learned to operate one node of this network." The Aquatic Depths delegation suddenly began emergency broadcasting on all frequencies, sending warnings in their own language that the translation systems couldn't immediately process. "You're lying," said the Zephyrian commander, but his voice lacked conviction. Sarah smiled again, that same genuinely pleased expression. "Admiral, would you mind providing a small demonstration?" "Copy that, Ambassador. Activating minimal field projection now." For exactly 30 seconds, every piece of technology in the council chambers stopped working. Not damaged, not destroyed, simply stopped. Life support, gravity generation, communication systems, defensive barriers, even the translation devices went completely silent. Then everything came back online as if nothing had happened. "The node we control," Sarah said into the stunned silence, "can affect an area roughly the size of this entire star system. The network, once fully activated, covers approximately 40% of this galaxy." She closed the datapad and returned it to her pocket. "Now, I believe someone mentioned a 24-hour deadline." "Earth's final warning. Stop attacking, or we'll unleash our true power." The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been in continuous debate for 18 hours. Outside the chambers, the greatest military minds of 12 species were frantically trying to develop contingency plans for something they didn't understand and couldn't predict. Admiral Korthax of the Zephyrian fleet stood before a three-dimensional tactical display showing the current positions of all known human assets. The display was frustratingly simple: a handful of slow-moving ships, a few established colonies, and one mysterious structure in the dark zone that their sensors couldn't properly analyze. "It has to be an elaborate bluff," he said to his assembled staff. "No species develops technology this advanced in secret. Our intelligence networks are too comprehensive." His chief analyst, a younger Zephyrian named Scythal, manipulated the holographic controls to highlight recent data. "Sir, we've been monitoring all human communications, industrial output, and resource allocation for the past 5 years. There's no indication of a massive military project. Their manufacturing is focused on civilian infrastructure, terraforming equipment, and basic defensive systems." "Exactly," Korthax said, his hood flaring with confidence. "They're trying to scare us with ancient artifacts and technological mysteries. Even if they found something in the dark zone, operating it would require resources and expertise they simply don't possess." Meanwhile, in a secure chamber 3 levels below the council chambers, the crystalline elders were conducting their own analysis. Unlike the other species, they had existed long enough to remember fragmentary records of the civilizations that had vanished from the dark zone. The Prime Elder, a massive crystal formation that had been consciousness for over 100,000 years, pulsed slowly with deep violet light as it processed historical data. "The time frame matches," it communicated to its fellow elders. 53,000 years ago, the architects began constructing large-scale projects in what is now the Dark Zone. Within 2,000 years, all traces of their civilization had vanished. A younger elder, barely 10,000 years old, flickered with uncertainty. "Vanished how? We've never found evidence of warfare, natural disaster, or system failure." "No," the Prime Elder agreed. "They simply left, all of them. Across hundreds of worlds, an entire galactic civilization abandoned their cities, their ships, their technology, and disappeared." "But the human claims that they learned to operate architect technology. That should be impossible. The complexity barriers alone." The Prime Elder's light shifted to a deep blue that among their species indicated profound concern. Unless the technology was designed to be operated by someone else. Unless the architects were building something for whoever came after them. Back in the main chambers, Ambassador Sarah Chen sat quietly while the various species representatives argued among themselves. Her communication device had remained silent since Admiral Harrison's demonstration, but she showed no sign of impatience or concern. The Hive Collective representative, clearly agitated, turned to address her directly. "Human, you speak of reshaping space itself. Such power would make your species dominant over all others. Why should we believe you would use it responsibly?" Sarah looked up from the notes she had been quietly writing. "That's an interesting question, but I think you're making an assumption about what dominance means to us." She stood and walked to the center of the chamber, her movement causing the automated systems to adjust lighting so she remained clearly visible to all species present. "Every species in this council achieved galactic status the same way. You developed superior military technology, conquered or absorbed weaker civilizations, established territorial controls, and built power structures that ensure your continued dominance." Sarah looked around the chamber slowly. "It's worked well for all of you." The Zephyrian commander leaned forward in his pod. "And you suggest humans are different?" "I suggest humans are lazy," Sarah said with a slight smile. "Conquest requires enormous ongoing effort. Territorial management means constant military presence. Dominance demands continuous vigilance against challenges and uprisings." She activated her data pad again, and the holographic display showed a simple chart of resource allocation across human-controlled space. Look at how we've developed the colonies you want us to abandon. No military bases, no orbital defense platforms, no strategic resource extraction facilities. The display highlighted civilian infrastructure, research stations, agricultural facilities, and what appeared to be recreational areas. Instead, we've built schools, libraries, and parks. We've terraformed these worlds to support multiple ecosystem types, not just human-compatible environments. We've established research partnerships with any species willing to participate. The Aquatic Depths delegation, who had remained mostly silent since the technology demonstration, suddenly activated their communication systems. You claim your species seeks no dominance, but the power you have revealed would make such claims irrelevant. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. True. Which brings me to the real purpose of this meeting. She pressed another button on her datapad, and the chamber's communication systems activated on their own, connecting to what appeared to be a direct line to Earth. Admiral Harrison, please brief the Council on Project Transition. The Admiral's voice filled the chamber. Certainly, Ambassador. Council representatives, Project Transition is humanity's plan for transferring control of the final protocol to a qualified galactic authority. The silence that followed was absolute. I'm sorry, said the Hive Collective representative. Did you say transferring control? That's correct. The technology we've discovered is too significant for any single species to control. Over the past year, we've been developing protocols for creating a multi-species oversight authority that could manage the system responsibly. The Zephyrian commander's hood flared wide. This is another deception. No species voluntarily gives up ultimate power. Sarah's expression became serious for the first time. Commander, your species has been spacefaring for over 12,000 years. In that time, how many civilizations have you absorbed, conquered, or displaced? The commander hesitated. That information is classified. It's not accusation, it's context. Every species in this chamber has similar numbers. The cycle repeats endlessly. Expansion, conflict, dominance, eventually decline and replacement by the next rising power. Sarah gestured to the empty seats around the chamber. There used to be 17 species on this council. 5 have fallen to various forms of extinction or absorption in just the past 3,000 years. The crystalline elders suddenly pulsed in unison, their light shifting to a pattern that indicated sudden understanding. The architects, the Prime Elder spoke, its voice carrying through the chamber, built the final protocol as a way to break the cycle. Sarah turned toward the elders. That's our conclusion as well. The technology doesn't just reshape space. It makes traditional concepts of territorial control irrelevant. Scarcity becomes meaningless when you can alter the fundamental properties of matter and energy. She activated the holographic display again, showing a simulation of space where different regions operated under different physical laws. Imagine sectors where faster-than-light travel works differently, where certain types of weapons simply can't function, where resource scarcity is eliminated by altering atomic structure itself. The simulation showed ships passing harmlessly through each other, weapons fire dissipating harmlessly, and barren worlds suddenly blooming with life. The architects didn't disappear, Sarah continued. They transcended the need for galactic civilization entirely. They moved beyond scarcity, beyond territorial competition, beyond the cycles that have trapped every species that followed them. The Hive Collective representative chittered nervously. And you propose to do what with this technology? Use it to give everyone the same choice the architects had. Sarah looked directly at each representative. Transform the galaxy into a place where no species needs to conquer others to survive and thrive. Admiral Harrison's voice filled the chamber again. Council representatives, we're transmitting the full technical specifications for the final protocol to your respective governments now. You'll see that the system requires unanimous consent from all recognized galactic civilizations before activation. The Zephyrian commander was on his feet now, his personal defense systems fully activated. Unanimous consent for what exactly? For reshaping this galaxy into a post-scarcity environment where every species can develop according to their own nature without competing for limited resources. Sarah sat back down, her manner becoming conversational again. Of course. If you prefer the current system of endless territorial disputes and resource wars, you're welcome to reject the proposal. We'll simply maintain control of the single node we've activated and continue with our modest colonial expansion. She paused, looking around the chamber with that slight smile again. But I should mention that 3 more species have independently discovered nodes of the network. The hegemony found one 6 months ago. The Void Seekers activated another just last week. And our intelligence suggests the Far Reach Collective will locate their node within the next few months. The temperature in the chamber seemed to plummet. Every representative was suddenly very still. So you see, Sarah continued pleasantly, the choice isn't really between human dominance and maintaining the status quo. The choice is between working together to build something better or watching the galaxy tear itself apart as multiple species gain access to reality-altering technology. The crystalline Prime Elder's voice cut through the shocked silence. How long do we have to decide? Sarah checked her simple timepiece. Well, your original ultimatum expires in about 4 hours, but the final protocol decision? That's more complex. She stood again, and this time her demeanor carried an authority that hadn't been present before. The other species who have found nodes are not as patient as humanity has been. They're not interested in consensus or cooperation. Give us your answer about the colonies by your deadline. But understand that regardless of your decision on that matter, the galaxy is changing whether we guide that change together or not. The chamber erupted again in heated discussions as representatives frantically contacted their home governments. But Sarah noticed that the crystalline elders had gone completely dark, and the aquatic depths delegation had begun what appeared to be deep meditation rituals. Some, at least, understood what was really at stake. Earth's final warning: stop attacking, or we'll unleash our true power. The deadline had passed 3 hours ago. Ambassador Sarah Chen remained in her simple chair at the center of the Galactic Council chambers, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Half the species' representatives had left to coordinate military responses. The other half were engaged in frantic consultations with their home governments about humanity's proposal for galactic transformation. Admiral Korthax stood in the primary tactical center of the Zephyrian flagship, watching real-time displays of the largest fleet mobilization in galactic history. Over 38,000 ships from 11 different species were converging on human-controlled space. "Final intelligence reports, Admiral," his chief analyst announced. "Human colonial settlements show no signs of evacuation or defensive preparation. Their ships remain in standard orbital positions. No weapons systems have been activated." Korthax studied the tactical display with growing confidence. Whatever technology the humans claimed to possess, they were clearly not prepared for actual warfare. "Signal the fleet. We advance on the Outer Rim colonies as planned." But in the deepest chambers of the Crystalline Elder's ancient fortress ship, a different conversation was taking place. "Prime Elder," the youngest of their kind, pulsed urgently. "The mathematical models are conclusive. If multiple species gain independent access to reality-altering technology, the probability of galactic civilization surviving the resulting conflicts approaches 0. The Prime Elder's massive form had remained completely dark for hours, processing implications that stretched across vast spans of time and probability. "Show me the human psychological profiles again." The data streams flowed between the crystal beings faster than any organic mind could follow. Humanity's brief but remarkable history played out in compressed time. Their rapid technological advancement, their unusual approaches to conflict resolution, their strange tendency to seek cooperative solutions even when holding superior positions. They are telling the truth about voluntary transfer of power, the Prime Elder concluded. Their species genuinely believes in what they call enlightened self-interest. They understand that permanent dominance is impossible and that cooperation produces better outcomes for everyone. But Prime Elder, their proposal requires trusting them with technology that could rewrite reality itself. The Prime Elder's light shifted to deep blue contemplation. No. Their proposal requires trusting ourselves to use such technology responsibly. They are offering to give it away. Meanwhile, Admiral Harrison stood in the command center of humanity's most advanced vessel, watching the approaching galactic fleet with remarkable calm. Around him, his staff monitored communications from the various coalition forces as they prepared for what they assumed would be humanity's swift destruction. "Admiral," his communications officer announced, "we're receiving transmission requests from the Hegemony, the Void Seekers, and the Far Reach Collective. They're demanding immediate meetings about the final protocol." Harrison nodded. "Patch them through to Ambassador Chen first. She should handle the diplomacy while we prepare for the demonstration." "Sir, are you certain about this approach? If the other node-controlling species don't cooperate..." Harrison looked at the massive tactical display showing the converging fleets. "Lieutenant, humanity spent 3 years studying architect technology not to gain power, but to understand responsibility. We're about to find out if we learned the right lessons." Back in the council chambers, Sarah was receiving simultaneous communications from the 3 species that had independently discovered their own nodes of the final protocol network. Their messages were remarkably similar: demands for immediate information sharing, threats about the consequences of human deception, and barely concealed panic about the implications of reality-altering technology. Sarah listened patiently to each message, then activated her simple communication device. "Admiral Harrison, please initiate Phase 2 of the demonstration. Full network activation, limited scope." "Copy that, Ambassador. Beginning network synchronization now." Across the galaxy, 4 separate structures began activating simultaneously. The node humanity controlled in the dark zone began drawing power from sources that defied conventional physics. Similar awakenings occurred in 3 other regions of space, as the Hegemony, Void Seekers, and Far Reach Collective found their carefully hidden technology suddenly responding to external commands. The effect was immediate and unmistakable. In a spherical region of space encompassing nearly 1,000 star systems, the fundamental nature of reality began shifting. Admiral Korthax was studying final approach vectors when every ship in his fleet suddenly stopped moving. Not damaged, not destroyed, but simply incapable of forward motion beyond a certain point. "Engineering report," he demanded. "Sir, our engines are functioning normally. Power systems show green across all boards. But we can't advance past this coordinate line. It's like space itself won't let us." Similar reports flooded in from across the massive fleet. 38,000 ships representing the combined might of galactic civilization found themselves completely unable to approach human space. "Admiral," his science officer announced with barely controlled panic, "we're detecting massive alterations in the fundamental constants of physics in the region ahead. Light speed appears to be variable, gravity is operating under different rules, and our weapon systems are reading as non-functional." In the council chambers, Sarah stood and addressed the few representatives who had remained. "What you're witnessing is a coordinated activation of 4 nodes of the final protocol network. The Hegemony, Void Seekers, and Far Reach Collective have just learned that their nodes are part of a larger system, and that system requires cooperation to function safely." The crystalline Prime Elder pulsed bright white, a color that indicated sudden understanding. "The network is designed to prevent unilateral use." "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. Each node can make limited reality alterations independently, but significant changes require multiple nodes working in harmony. The architects built safeguards against exactly the kind of power struggles we're seeing today. Her communication device activated on its own, and the panicked voices of the other node-controlling species filled the chamber. "Human, what have you done to our technology? How are you controlling our systems? Reverse this immediately or face the consequences." Sarah waited for the angry voices to quiet before responding. "Leaders of the Hegemony, Void Seekers, and Far Reach Collective, you're learning the same lesson we learned when we first activated our node. The final protocol network was designed by beings who understood that ultimate power must come with ultimate responsibility." She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed real-time readings from all 4 active nodes. "Your nodes are not malfunctioning. They're operating exactly as the architects intended. The network requires consensus for major reality alterations, and it cannot be used for aggressive purposes against other node controllers." The voice of the Hegemony Supreme Commander crackled through the communicator. "You're saying we cannot use this technology for conquest?" "I'm saying the technology won't allow itself to be used that way. Try to attack another node controller, and your system will shut down completely. Try to make unilateral changes to fundamental physics, and the network will isolate your node until you cooperate with the others." The Far Reach Collective's electronic communication synthesizer produced what sounded like frustrated static. "Then what is the purpose of this power?" Sarah looked directly at the camera that she knew was transmitting her image to the other node controllers. "To end the age of scarcity and territorial competition. To give every species in the galaxy access to unlimited resources and development opportunities. To make conquest pointless because cooperation becomes infinitely more profitable." The tactical display in Admiral Korthax's flagship suddenly shifted, showing new data that made no sense according to any known physics. The region of space around human colonies was displaying energy readings that suggested matter itself was being converted and restructured on a massive scale. "Sir," his science officer announced in a shaking voice, "sensors show that 17 uninhabited systems near the human colonies have just been transformed. Barren worlds are showing massive ecosystem development, asteroid fields are being converted into habitable environments, and stellar energy output is being redistributed to optimize conditions for life." Korthax stared at the impossible readings. "In how long?" "The transformations are happening in real time, sir. Thousands of years of terraforming work being accomplished in minutes." In the council chambers, Sarah was now addressing the full assembly of species representatives who had returned upon learning that the greatest fleet in galactic history had been stopped by forces they couldn't understand or combat. "The demonstration you're witnessing represents less than 1% of the final protocol's capabilities. 4 nodes working together can reshape entire star systems. The full network, with all 47 nodes activated, could transform this galaxy into a post-scarcity environment where every species can thrive without competing for resources." The Zephyrian commander, his earlier confidence completely evaporated, leaned forward in his pod. "And you claim humanity would voluntarily give up control of this system?" Sarah activated her datapad one final time. The holographic display showed detailed plans for what humanity called the Galactic Transition Authority, a multi-species organization designed to oversee the responsible use of the final protocol network. The transition would happen in phases over approximately 50 years. Participating species would gradually gain access to node-controlled regions where scarcity has been eliminated. Non-participating species would remain in unaltered space with their traditional territories and resources unchanged. She paused, looking around the chamber slowly. "But participation requires accepting certain principles. No territorial expansion through conquest, no suppression of developing species, no hoarding of resources that could benefit others. essentially agreeing to move beyond the patterns of behavior that have defined galactic politics for the past 100,000 years. The Hive Collective representative chittered nervously. And species that refuse to participate? Continue exactly as they are now. The network doesn't interfere with civilizations that haven't chosen to be part of the transformation. Sarah's expression became serious. But those civilizations also can't interfere with those that have chosen to evolve beyond scarcity and competition. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The representatives were being offered a choice between transformation into something unprecedented or potential isolation as the galaxy around them moved beyond the old patterns of conflict and resource competition. Admiral Harrison's voice filled the chamber one final time. Council representatives, the current demonstration will continue for exactly 24 hours. During that time, you can observe the reality alterations taking place and discuss the implications with your governments. At the end of that period, we'll shut down the network and return everything to normal conditions. Sarah stood and walked toward the chamber's exit. When you're ready to discuss the details of galactic transformation, we'll be here. When you're ready to move beyond the cycle of conquest and competition that has trapped every spacefaring species in this galaxy's history, we'll help you build something better. She paused at the doorway and looked back at the assembled representatives. But understand this. The age of scarcity politics is ending whether you participate or not. The only question is whether you'll help guide that change, or spend your civilization's remaining time watching others evolve beyond you. As Sarah left the chamber, the tactical displays throughout the galaxy continued showing impossible transformations taking place in real time. 38,000 ships remained frozen in space, unable to advance against forces that operated by rules their crews couldn't comprehend. For the first time in galactic history, military superiority had become irrelevant. The future belonged to those species willing to reimagine what civilization could become when survival was no longer the driving force behind every decision. The age of humanity's true power had begun, and it looked nothing like conquest.